I'm up here in the barn at the home place. Kind of a dreary day here in January. It's not super cold, but the temperature is dropping. So the next day or two of deer hunting, if you can go, should be pretty solid. I wanted to take a minute because I'd been promising these. I wanted to take a minute and do a little story time. Because we've had, there again, a lot of great back and forth after the woodshed talk. And there's a lot of folks out there that are not pleased with their state wildlife agencies. And yeah, they need some work. What you don't understand, having been there, is that, yeah, every wildlife biologist that's employed by a state agency is not created equal. And, character varies, abilities vary, and experience definitely varies. I came up during my tenure in the last of the good times, when you could spend a lot of time looking at deer habitat. You spend a lot of time working with clubs and not fighting diseases and wrestling with politics as much at least in the earlier part of your career. But I wanted to tell y'all a story about an incident that happened under a previous administration with the state agency here in my home state. Now, as a preface, the current leadership is much better. And those of you that know me know that we came up back in the earlier part of my career, we came up under a much more difficult executive staff to contend with than what's there now. What we got now ain't perfect. Ain't nothing ever going to be perfect. But what we have now is at least leadership that has enough testicular fortitude to allow an officer to write a commission or a ticket for hunting turkeys over bait that consisted of live crickets. That was very comical. Needed to happen. That commissioner was a malicious individual that was working against conservation. It's good that he's gone. Won't miss him. But at any rate, back towards the end of my tenure with the state agency, there was a deer killed by a young feller that was the son of a federal employee. This federal employee was a fairly stand-up guy. I don't know him well, but I know him well enough. Used to work with him with a different agency. And this young feller shot this deer. I believe he had purple ear tags in his ears and metal ear tags. That was interesting. So, the pictures of said ear tags were submitted. The ear tags themselves were collected. We told the young fella to take the deer and have a good time. It was a 1-year-old 5-point. And from the property and the facility from which he escaped, he was on the left-hand side of that bell curve that I've talked about for them captive 1-year-olds. Not a real good 1-year-old 5-point. Not great. Very average. Average deer for free range. Trying to get over here out the wind. A little dicey. I might just have to find somewhere to stop and park it. I've been trying to video this thing in the barn there, but that bright light kept crossing up the video. 1-year-old 5-point gets shot, ear tags in his ears. So evidence cards are filled out. The deer's an obvious escape from a breeding pen. This breeding pen at the time belonged to a commissioner. We tracked the deer back based on the ear tag numbers and the inventories to this commissioner. The chief of law at that time was part of the leadership regime that was problematic. He stated because the gate was left open for 24 hours that it did not constitute a breach in the fence. There was no violation. And the executive director at that time agreed. And it was stated clearly in the rule that enclosure owners had to report breaches within 24 hours. Had to report them and had to repair them. And allowing a deer to escape, either intentionally or unintentionally. Maybe he didn't want to feed him. I'll have another video in a few days about some of that. But they decided this was not a violation. Said commissioner was not issued a citation of any shape, form, or fashion, and we rocked on Margaret. Now, if you and I went down here and we caught one too many crappie, will we get a ticket? It was not the officer's fault. It was not the biologist's fault that did the evaluation on the deer. The technical staff ran down the numbers and tracked it back to this commissioner's breeding pen. But the executive leadership chose to ignore it. So what I want y'all to think about is, yeah, we disagree with hunters, disagree with biologists disagree with hunters. But I want y'all to remember something, that not everyone, but most of the biologists that are employed with these state agencies generally care, and they generally want to do a good job. They generally want what's best for the wildlife resource. Hunters do too. There's one more story I'll tell you that's related to this. Because many years ago, we had a change in leadership in the Wildlife Bureau. And there were some WMAs in my region. The hunters were happy. The biologists that manage those areas were happy as well. But a couple of other people decided that we needed to change the antler regs on that property, on that WMA, because we didn't want to push the big buck narrative. This antler criteria, it was 2 criteria, targeted the average 3-year-old. You had a few 4s get by. They were shooting good deer and they were happy with it. Hunters were happy with it. Me being passionate about these WMAs, I vehemently disagreed with changing the antler criteria and dropping them down to target a smaller buck to allow people more opportunity to shoot. I vehemently disagreed. I hunted on this area. We'd had a handful of good years hunting on it. I helped manage it. And I did not want to see, after seeing the potential that was there, the antler criteria dropped. And so I disagreed, vocally disagreed, and I was trumped. And then shortly thereafter, a few months later, the next fall, whenever all of this came to public meetings and we had to discuss and explain the changes in antler criteria on a lot of these WMAs, public didn't like it. I didn't like it. But who do you think had to get in front of the public and defend it? Yeah. So those of you that want to throw rocks at the biologist at public meetings and you want to get irate, just remember that they may agree with you. And they may want something different. But they were told by their leadership that thou shalt defend this because it's an agency decision and you have to defend it if you're wearing that uniform. And if you don't defend it, you will lose your job. And that is part of how the rubber hits the road. But at the end of the day, yeah, we had a documented escape from an enclosure from a breeding pen. And no citation was written because it was an influential person. And yes, we have to deal with decision changes that we may or may not agree with. And then the people that disagree sometimes have to get in front of the public and find a way to defend it. So, with that, y'all have a good one. Go deer hunting, go shoot you something, and enjoy it.